Hi guys, and welcome to my podcast, The Cyclist Next Door. If you are enjoying these episodes, why not like, subscribe or share with a loved one, a fellow cyclist or somebody who might be interested. The time has come for today's episode. So grab your cup of tea, settle into your zone 2 momentum. Let's go. Rolling.
Hi guys, and welcome to the Cyclist Next Door podcast. And today we're in Via, which is in Cold Drops Yard, another great place to come and meet your friends after a cycling ride. But today I'm meeting Jeremy Ford from Africa Rising. Now, Africa Rising is an organisation which spotlights cycling across the African continent. And what better time than to sit down with Jeremy with the Rwanda World Cycling Championships coming up to talk about the momentous event which is happening, and also the future of cycling and our hopes and visions for that, and also to find out how we, as part of the cycling community, can play a part in this big event which is coming up. So, let's crack on. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
So great to catch up with you. First of all, can you give us a brief introduction to who you are for those who have not met Jeremy yet, and also your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. So I've been around African cycling for about 12 years. Started off in Kenya a long time ago, riding mountain bikes, and got into the sport side of African cycling. Africa Rising is a non-profit based in the US. And essentially we help develop young African talent across the continent. And on the other side of our business is the lobbying and promotion. So we have around about 100,000 followers on social media. We're on every platform. We're pretty prolific, as I'm sure you've seen. And the idea is to promote the riders that are out there racing in Europe or racing around the world, as well as the riders back home that are trying to become pro cyclists.
And that's awesome as well. There's such a beautiful vision at the heart, Africa Rising, and kind of what you want to achieve. Are you able to just give us a little flavour of some of the drive late, which have been sort of driving the initiatives there? What things are you really focusing on? Perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think back just 10 years, you had Daniel Tekla-Hymanot. Sorry, Peter Sagan has just walked into the cafe, so I'm trying not to fanboy right now. But literally 10 years ago, we actually celebrated this at the Tour de France last month. Daniel Tekla-Hymanot won the King of the Mountain jersey at the Tour de France as an Eritrean. He was the first African, first black man ever to have a jersey at the race. And it was that moment where suddenly we realized the talent was there. We'd seen the talent developing.
Absolutely.
But we said, right, now we have to really help these riders, because what actually happens is, if you think about Europe, I started racing when I was 4 years old, right? You're a coach,
yeah.
you know this.
Yep.
I was racing BMX when I was 4. Our riders are getting on bikes at 13, 14, 15 in countries around Africa, but they haven't had that 10 years. So what we're trying to do is find ways to get younger and younger riders on bikes, because that will be where they develop.
Absolutely, and that's great as well, and that's the next generation, so important. Now that we've had the foundation, we've heard about Africa Rising, we're just going to zoom out a little bit to sort of African cycling across the continent. Now, from the time that you've been involved in it, what kind of sort of milestone and success stories can you share with us? I imagine there's so many, but is there anything that really sort of stands out to you that you just want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, Daniel getting that King of the Mountain jersey in 2015 was a big moment, but I think you have these moments in sport like that where you have that a win or a jersey. But I think the moment this year, last year actually, when Biniam Girmay won the three stages of the Tour de France and obviously had the jersey, there's an image on the Champs-Elysees of Pogacar, Vingegaard, I think, or Remco, and Biniam. And that was a huge moment, because what was happening at that time is we were getting, as Biniam was getting more and more famous and doing so well, we were getting inbounds from riders across Africa saying, a guy that looks like me is winning at the Tour de France.
Representation. Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
And that was the moment we were like, hang on, we've never had that before. We've had the odd win, with Daniel and Mahawi Kudus and people like this. But with Biniam winning at the world's biggest bike race, and Biniam, I think himself said on the Champs-Elysees, I've opened the door. And it was such a beautiful moment, because from that moment we saw real momentum You know, kids in Benin, in Rwanda, Uganda, Algeria, Morocco, and then kids around the world were going, someone who looks like me can win in cycling. And we've seen real growth from that moment.
Absolutely, and it was such a beautiful moment. I remember one of his teammates saying, you know, this one's for Africa. You know, I think people just sort of absolutely love that moment and could just feel part of it. What makes cycling in Africa so unique from any other part of the world?
I think the reality is, so I was talking to David Lapatien, you know, the president of UCI at the Tour of Rwanda in February, and I said, you've got to start talking about cycling being Africa's second sport. Because firstly, that gives some context, because soccer's always number one, right? Wherever you go in the world, unfortunately, soccer is always number one. But to say something's number two is like saying gold and silver medal, right? You're close to each other. And cycling it's a sport that's come from transportation. You know, in England 120 years ago, it was the poor man's transportation to factories.
Exactly.
In China now, in India, in Africa, all these places, it's still that transportation system. But what that leads to is then, what do you do at the weekends? And what you do at the weekends is sport and exercise. So what we're seeing in Africa is, as you're seeing the middle class is starting to grow, as you've seen around the world as well, cycling's becoming something that people want to do.
Absolutely.
You know, if you look at India, for example, right now, I was talking to a guy from the Indian Cycling Federation. He said, we have a real problem because cycling in India is seen as a poor man's transport. So people don't want their kids racing bikes because it's seen as like a different thing.
Okay.
In Africa, we don't have that. Like, bicycles are seen as one of the most useful tools in people's existence. But what's happening on the racing side is you've had either cultural influx from whether it's colonialism from Belgium or France, UK or Holland, and you look at someone like Eritrea, like it is their number one sport.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they're not very good at soccer. They never win AFCON and things like this, but they love cycling. And so you look at that and say, that's what every country needs, is people that, you've got juniors everywhere, you've got U23, you've got the adults. So what we're seeing right across the continent, and to some extent it's probably jealousy as well, in that East Africa's always dominated cycling, you know, with the Eritreans, Ethiopians, Rwandans, Algeria, Morocco in the north and South Africa in the south. But you're seeing West Africa now, you know, Benin, Ghana, Nigeria, Togo. Like, soccer's always dominating there, but they're seeing Africans do well in cycling. So suddenly the West, in the last 2 years, we've seen massive growth in the West. So as a sport, it's everywhere in Africa. It's just, the challenge for us normally is just getting the equipment, getting the riders to races and things like that. But we're seeing more and more and more interest, especially from ministries of sport, to then fund their cycling federations, which they normally put the money into soccer or something else.
Amazing, and it's just been so lovely just to see the growth of cycling in Africa, honestly, and see it go from strength to strength as well. So, obviously, we've got the Rwanda World Championships. It's happening in Rwanda, happening in Kigali, but this is such a momentous event. And can you just break down to us, in just a few words, what this event really means to Africa, not just Rwanda, to Africa as a whole? What makes it so special for us?
Someone said to me at the Tour de France, cycling's had world champs for 100 years, and yet it's the first time in Africa.
Absolutely.
So part of it is a European-dominated sport saying, okay, it's time for Africa. You think about football, when South Africa hosted the Football World Cup, everyone suddenly went, oh, hang on.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing with Kigali 2025 is exactly the same thing. Federations around the world looking at a part of the planet they've never looked at. You know, Belgium cycling, Dutch cycling, British cycling, Argentinian cycling, Australian cycling. They've never thought about Africa. Suddenly they're like, oh, we can ride. If there's a world champs there, we must be able to ride bikes there. So you're seeing this crazy focus on African cycling at the moment, which is absolutely wonderful. I mean, Rwanda is saying they think they'll have 10,000 tourists come to watch for the week, you know, and fly in. And as we know, when you have a huge sporting event, there's always the legacy of that. Because when this event takes place on the 1st of October, after all the racing is done, the whole world will go, in cycling, will say, oh yeah, Africa has hosted a World Championships.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing like that.
Absolutely, and you know, you mentioned there sort of the legacy as well, and the impact it'll have on the next generation, seeing that happening on African soil, and that is just beautiful. So in terms of like the World Championships, obviously the global cycling community, I imagine everybody wants to be there, but not everyone can be. So can people do, sort of supporters and the global cycling community, what can they do to feel part of this and feel connected to the event when it's happening at the time? Is there anything you'd recommend?
I'd start now. I mean, there's an incredible website for the event. I think it's like UCI Kigali 2025. Obviously, Africa Rising is covering it. We started we have a live news feed for the World Champs. We started about 6 months ago where we're covering, I mean, obviously African focus, but riders development, race results, things like that. I noticed on Pro Cycling Stats this morning that the teams are starting to announce their teams, so you can start to see the riders that are going to be there. South Africa and Mauritius have just announced their full squads. But you'll see coming after the Vuelta, you'll see the Dutch, the Belgians, all these guys, the Brits start to announce their teams. So getting to know who the teams are and who's going to be racing. The one thing I'm really talking to people about is the women's side, because this is the first ever World Champs with a U23 women's race.
Excellent.
And it's about time.
So important.
There's been no reason not to have it before, but they finally brought that in. For Rwanda to host the launch of the first ever U23 jersey.
Yeah.
So you'll have a new world champion at this race that's never existed before. And because it's a new race, there's no qualification.
Yeah.
So every country on the planet with a federation can send up to 5 women for that event.
Okay.
So what you're going to see is, I mean, there'll be some people you've never heard of, and there'll be some from big names from Europe as well. But you're going to see a true world championship race in that women's U23 race. And that's the one I'm saying to people I think is a highlight.
Absolutely.
If I look at the elite races, men and women, I think we know in the elite men who's probably going to win the race. You'll know the name or names.
Exactly.
And with the women probably the same. But with that U23, you're going to have Africans, Asians, South Americans, Europeans of all levels racing each other. And I think that to me is going to be the highlight event.
Amazing. And you talked about the blog, but that is so important, the blog that you, Africa Rising put out, really sort of breaking it down to people, what's happening on the ground. And obviously we at Cyclists Next Door will be definitely following that. But we all can get involved, and contribute, isn't it? By social media even, sharing, really spotlighting African cycling, because this is our time, isn't it? It's not 100%. Just the guys on the ground riding.
Absolutely, because if you think about it from a social media point of view, there has been no accounts around this. If I look at things like the Kigali 2025 accounts, right, they're still building their following because they're brand new for this year. With Africa Rising, we have 100,000 people across the social media following us, but we're seeing massive growth as we build up to the event. You can see it. The Vuelta will finish in a few days.
Yeah.
And from that moment, the next biggest bike race on the planet will be the World Championships. So you'll see everyone start to focus. And obviously it'll be televised across the board as well. And I think if you go to the Kigali website, there's a list of all the distributors on TV across the world. So you can watch it there. I think the BBC will be covering it for sure from here.
Brilliant. And this really is our time. It's our time, Africa. Spotlight, all eyes on Rwanda, Kigali. But definitely something to be celebrated for the whole continent.
Absolutely.
All the countries
and
there.
Also the legacy. I mean, it's like everything. On the 1st of October, all the banners will be taken down and all the hoardings will be taken down. And that's where we say to people, like, that's where a lot of the work will begin, because there will be African riders who have done something in those races. They won't be winning medals in many cases, but there'll be African riders that have raced at junior level or U23 level, and they will do better than people expect. So you'll have these stories. There's an Ethiopian junior called Siga Kase. She's 18 years old. She just raced the Tour de l'Avenir.
Wow. Okay.
She was the youngest rider in the Tour de l'Avenir by 2 years.
Brilliant.
We just hoped she'd finish the stages. We'd hoped she'd finish the race.
Yeah,
she was top 20ing on every single stage.
So good.
So the amount of people that are suddenly hitting her saying, hang on, who's this 18-year-old from Ethiopia? If she does well in that junior women's race, I couldn't tell you what's going to happen. There could be contracts coming from World Tour, Pro Conti. So things like that, you'll see a lot of those kind of develops because everyone watches the World Championships.
Fantastic. And you moved on to my next point, which I want to talk about the legacy, when the World Tour's over and everyone packs up and the big names leave Kigali. What is your vision and hope for cycling across Africa? What do you hope this event will leave?
I think there's two things. One is the effect on the athletes, and one is the effect on the supporters. From the athletes' point of view, this is the first time many of these African athletes will have raced at such a high level with real strong global European riders. So you'll have junior riders that don't quite know if they're good enough.
Okay.
And they'll race that race. And if they finish that race, they'll know they're good enough. That will give them motivation for the next 2-3 years of their lives to say, actually, I've just raced the Belgians and I'm good enough. You know, that's what we want these riders to experience. We don't expect them to win the races. That's not what this is about. We expect them to perform. Because if they perform in something that if I look at, say, the Benin team that I'm working with, many of those riders have never raced outside Africa.
Right.
The chances of them racing in Europe are difficult. So at the World Champs, we bring the racing to them.
Absolutely.
They'll race against people that they've seen on TV. And if they do well, that will motivate them. Which means back home, the Benin fans, the people that are putting the money in, that support them from the government and the Ministry of Sport, they'll say, actually, this is something we should continue to invest in.
Yeah.
Because it's been on TV. And it's
Amazing.
rare for those federations to see their riders at such a high level.
That's incredible. If you were speaking to a cyclist, a supporter, and you had one message for them about why they should care about this event, which is happening in just a few weeks, what would be your sort of direct message to them, just to close everything off? Why should we care what's happening in Rwanda?
I think it's because in 100 years of pro cycling, it's the first time Africa's had its time. So I think everyone is, I wouldn't say we have a duty to watch it, but like, just embrace it. You're going to see, if you've never watched Tour of Rwanda, which is sort of the base event for these races, if you've never watched Tour of Rwanda, watch the World Championships, because having been there, I mean, we expect nearly 2 million people to be on the road on the Saturday of the elite women's race, and 2.5 to 3 million on the road on the Sunday, because the people have got school and work on Saturdays, right? So Sunday, everyone's off work. There'll be 3 million people on the road. That is estimately 4 times as many people as the Tour de France.
Amazing.
So if you're watching this thing on TV, you will see something you have never seen before. It is an event on the roads with crazy crowds, and it is unique. And I'd say to everyone, if you can, watch any of the races, because you'll see some of the most incredible crowd scenes in cycling you've ever seen.
Amazing. I absolutely love it. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I hope we can talk at length later on, because there's so much more to talk about in terms of sort of Africa Rising and the amazing work they do across the continent. But thank you today for your insight and your passion for cycling. And yeah, thank you very much. And I think now we're going to run off and do some a fan moment, because we have a celebrity in the building. All right, thank you very much, Jeremy.
Good to see you.
Bye.
Hi guys, thank you for joining me on this episode of Cyclists Next Door. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and if so, please like, subscribe and share. Let's grow this community. And join me back here again as we meet the next Cyclists Next Door, as we unpack the journey of everyday people who have picked up a bike, experienced the joy of cycling, and have been on their own personal adventures. So, until next time, rolling.